The year 2025 is halfway gone. The first 6 months have not been easy for many. It has been a time of unanswered prayers, delayed dreams, and tears shed in silence. But you are still here. You still have faith. And that means you are still walking the path meant for those who are chosen. If the past months have been filled with dark days, the remaining half of the year is your chance to witness the marvelous work God is doing, quietly but steadfastly. Every drop of sweat, every sleepless night, every moment you wanted to give up but held on tight, none of it has been forgotten. For these are the very materials God uses to craft the eternal gem that is you. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. And that prolonged silence is not rejection, but the pause before a miracle. God says, I see you keep going. Though your heart is heavy, I see you still believe. Though there is no evidence, that is exactly why you are being ushered into a season of brilliance. If, by mid-year, you still haven't seen any promises fulfilled, do not be discouraged, for true promises often come unannounced, and they often appear when you think everything is too late, but it is never too late on heaven's clock. The remaining months of 2025 are the land God has sanctified for those who do not give up. You are stepping into a time when heaven and earth shift. Everything that once opposed you is weakening. Every negative word, every doubt, they are dissolving before the light of a new season. If the first 6 months were about deep plowing, the last 6 months will be about reaping. None of your wounds will be wasted. They are becoming evidence of the victory to come, and in the eyes of the Creator, no tear is invisible. Every drop you've shed in silence is being gathered to forge your glory. Dear friend, if you are exhausted, do not be ashamed. Only true warriors dare to admit they are tired. But faith does not lie in perfection. It lies in perseverance. If you are still standing amid the storm, you are stronger than you think. If you still pray, despite seeing no results, heaven has already begun to act. 2025 is not just a number. It is a moment that marks a new generation. A generation of those who have cried, fallen, and lost their way, but did not surrender. And you are part of that generation. Those chosen by God are not those who have never fallen. They are the ones who rise with trembling knees. They are the ones who bear wounds, but still believe in healing. They are the ones forgotten by the world, but remembered by heaven. In the middle of 2025, a new season is closer than ever. You may not feel it clearly yet, but the clouds are moving. What has been delayed will suddenly open. Doors once shut will begin to creak, signaling the day they swing wide. Do not measure your worth by what you have not yet gained. Look at what you have not given up. That is your faith. And that faith is enough to move mountains. Enough for you to walk through the rest of the year, not just surviving, but thriving. God is speaking to you right now. You have persevered to the middle of the year, and I will make the rest of this year astonish you. Not because you performed well, but because you never stopped hoping in me. So, no matter how many tears you've shed, now is the time to believe they are turning into gems, not at the end of the year, but right now, in mid-season, mid-year, in the midst of the night's transformation. In 2025, miracles will not come to the careless, the discouraged, or those who give up. They will come to you, the one who dares to cry, dares to believe, dares to keep walking. Though your steps are weary, though your heart has been broken, you still go on. You are the living illustration of this promise. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. No tear is wasted. No pain is in vain. All of it is being used to build a stronger version of you. A person who, when you look back, will leave you in awe. There will come a moment when you realize if you hadn't gone through all that pain, you wouldn't have the depth to feel the holiness of joy. And that moment is not some distant day. It is 2025, precisely the second half of the year, precisely right after you read this. Sorrow is not the end. It is the turning point, and you are standing at the crossroads of destiny. One more step, and you will no longer be the person you were. If someone has hurt you, forgive them, not because they deserve it, but because you need freedom to soar. If the past has left you confused, leave it behind. For you were not called to live forever in darkness. You were called to shine. God is rebuilding what was broken, not in the old way, but through a path you never imagined. For He is the one who does not repeat miracles. Every time He acts, it is a new chapter without precedent. You may have lost everything, but you still have the most important thing, faith. And that alone is enough to rebuild everything. Stronger, deeper, brighter. And do you know what? You are not alone in this journey, for there are thousands like you, carrying the same longing to see God's hand intervene, to live out what they were called to do, to step out of the darkness and into a morning full of peace. You are not by yourself. You are part of the chosen. Those whose lives will be lessons for the next generation. Those whose every scar will become a living testimony. Those whose tears will turn into precious gems, not only in this life, but in the life to come. There are moments of silence in life, not because everything has stopped, but because heaven and earth are quietly preparing for a shift. The chosen often sense change before their eyes see it. They carry an unrest no one can explain. They suddenly feel that what once fit now feels tight, that relationships once close no longer resonate, that dreams thought to be old are reviving, strong, fierce, like the wind at the start of a season. That is not coincidence. It is Zahnel. Have you ever felt your heart stir in the middle of the night, though nothing clear has happened? Are there mornings when you wake with the sense that you're about to step into something different? Even though life around you seems the same, that is the stirring from heaven, the chime signaling you are nearing what you've prayed for. Dear friend, not everyone hears that sound. Only souls softened by the Holy Spirit, hearts broken and pieced back together by faith, are sensitive enough to notice the invisible movement approaching. And you, if you're reading these words with a tremor in your heart, that is proof you are being awakened, called to rise. fitted into God's divine plan for the season ahead. The book of Joel once wrote, "And afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions." Joel 2:28. This is not unfamiliar to you. Those vague visions, those recurring dreams you can't forget, those thoughts echoing in your mind like an unfinished song. They are hints. They are reminders. They are guides. When the ground cracks dry, the farmer knows rain is near. Likewise, when your heart grows restless, it's not because you're lost, but because you're about to be relocated. When your soul starts pulling away from things that once satisfied you, that's when God is lifting you out of an old garment to clothe you in a new destiny. Do not be troubled if the season's shift arrives and you're not ready. For the chosen do not need to prepare with ability. They only need to be willing in spirit, an open faith, an obedient heart, a soul not hardened. God does not wait for you to be perfect to call you. He calls you, then begins to perfect you through each step of the journey. Another sign of a shifting season is when you start letting go, not out of despair, but with a strange calm. Things that once worried you no longer consume your mind. Plans that once controlled you are now mere whispers. That's the sign you've passed the first lesson of trust. Learning to release without fear, to surrender without clinging. If someone ever told you not to trust your spiritual intuition, remember, the chosen are always misunderstood. Joseph was called a dreamer when he shared his vision of rising. David was despised for being just a shepherd, yet it was they, those small in the eyes of the world, who turned history upside down simply because they listened to the signals from above. You, too, are in that flow. It is no accident that you were born into this generation, in this very year, to live through trials that are not easy and still carry an unbroken faith. It is no accident that you're beginning to notice yourself changing, even without anyone asking you to, for heaven has set a schedule for you, and the heavenly clock never misses a beat. The change of a spiritual season is rarely loud. It comes quietly, like rain falling at night. You don't hear the first drop clearly, but when you wake in the morning, the ground is soft. Likewise, you won't see the first day God changes everything, but you will see the evidence. Vivid, undeniable, alive. An unexpected phone call. A door you thought was sealed suddenly opening. A new friend bringing an idea you never considered. A small opportunity that makes your heart leap fiercely. These are the small bricks paving the way for something greater. Do not despise small signs, for sometimes miracles come in a breeze, not a storm. God says, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness." Isaiah 43:19. You don't need to wait until year's end. The season has begun. And you don't need to look outside to verify it. Just listen to the stirring in your heart. You are standing in a season that looks unchanged on the surface, but your inner self is being transformed. That is the real change. When your mind is renewed, when your soul is realigned, when your heart begins to expect what is right, you have already entered a new season without needing the scenery around you to shift. The true shift doesn't happen outside. It begins when you stop fighting as you once did. You no longer rage at every delay. You no longer grow bitter over the past. You start to feel peace even when nothing is certain. That is the privilege of the chosen. They carry peace in the storm because they know the one who walks with them never slumbers. Dear friend, you are in a season of miracles, even if the signs aren't clear yet. And what is about to unfold in the remaining 6 months of 2025 will make you realize every tear shed, every silent battle, every moment you thought you'd collapse. They were all stepping stones to this moment. You don't need to wait for something grand to know you've entered a new season. Just look at yourself. If you see you're lighter, deeper, more generous, and stronger in faith, you've already stepped in. Some take years to realize they entered a new season the moment their heart stopped wrestling. Not because anything outside changed dramatically, but because their way of seeing, waiting, and living inwardly was no longer the same. The true season's shift doesn't call with thunder. It comes like a breath, yet deep enough to make your heart tremble. If lately you felt restless with stagnation, that's not a sign of negativity. It's a sign your inner self is yearning to rise to a higher level. Those who never knew they were born to change something would never be uneasy with standing still. But you refuse to settle, and that alone confirms you belong to the chosen. When God prepares someone for a new season, He doesn't start with their environment. He starts with their awareness. First, you'll feel the old scenery no longer brings you joy. Then, habits that once comforted you become meaningless. And then you'll see clearly you're no longer content living small, no longer willing to be a shadow, no longer able to live a life just to please others. That is not selfishness. That is awakening. Every chosen one has a moment when they can no longer return to their old self. Not because they hate who they were, but because they know they were called to live true to their soul. You are at that threshold. You can no longer fit into the tight garment of the past. Sometimes, a new season doesn't come with good news. It arrives by making you feel empty with everything that once brought you joy. God does this to create space. If you're still full of old things, how can He have room to pour in the new, dear friend? If lately you've started withdrawing from meaningless revelry, if you sit in silence for hours just listening to yourself, if you feel something greater awaits ahead that you don't yet know, that means you're being transferred in silence. Everything may seem dim, but it's actually very clear. For God always writes the pages of destiny in invisible ink, and only those who are patient will see the words begin to appear. Sometimes you look at a familiar scene and suddenly feel it's foreign. Sometimes you hear an old song and suddenly sense it carries a new message. Sometimes you reread a scripture you know by heart and weep because you grasp its true meaning. That is the sign of spiritual eyes being opened. You don't need anyone to confirm it. You know. The chosen don't need to wait for recognition to start walking. They set out amid doubts, but with a light in their heart that never fades. Sometimes it's just the thought in the dead of night, I was born for more than just existing. And so they go. No fanfare, no banners, just an urge they cannot resist. If lately everything feels repetitive and no longer moves you, if you start wanting to do something bold, not to prove anything, but because you know you need to live true, then you're already touching the season of transformation. And the wonder is this: you don't need to know where you're going to start walking. God doesn't need you to see the whole map. He only wants you to be faithful to the light you have today. One small step in obedience can open an entire field of opportunity. For that is heaven's way, not revealing everything at once, but unveiling it step by step. In this season, you'll notice something: profound solitude begins to take on beauty. You no longer fear silence. You no longer feel lost in a crowd. You no longer need to fill the void with noise. For within you, another voice is growing louder. It is the voice of purpose, the call of mission, the whisper of the Creator meant solely for your soul. Dear friend, you are not in disarray. You are being cleansed of what no longer serves your life. Every tremor is not collapse. It is realignment. You are not being diminished. You are being focused. Every silence, every closed door is God's way of keeping you from wrong turns. The chosen never walk easily, but they always walk true. No one else sees their path, but their steps echo far into heaven. And one thing is certain: though you may not know exactly where you're going, every step you take is being used by God to draw the map of a miracle. That is why you feel you're standing at a boundary, no longer belonging to the old place, but not yet fully in the new. That feeling, suspended, empty, doubting, is not a flaw. It is a sacred transition. The intersection between two worlds, the place where heaven is breathing new life into you. When you look in the mirror and no longer recognize yourself, not out of disappointment, but because you see a version being transformed, that is the sure sign you have entered the season of metamorphosis. And from this moment on, don't expect to go back to being the old you. For the old you can no longer contain you. Have you ever wondered why the hardest years unfold in silence? No spotlight, no recognition, no one standing beside you to cheer, just you, with inner scratches that words cannot express. If you've lived through such days, then you understand everything enduring is not born in applause. Everything refined does not mature amid noise. A pearl is not born in light. It is formed inside an oyster, under pressure, in darkness, in solitude, amid the invisible. The chosen are like that, forged not in crowds, but in quiet rooms where only the conversation between you and God remains. The greatest battles are not fought on battlefields, but in the mind, where you must choose between surrender or standing firm, unseen by anyone, in the waiting. You've learned not to resist adversity, but to accept it as a sharpening tool. And that's when you began to change. No longer reacting hastily, no longer raging at every disappointment. Within you, a different being is forming, slowly but powerfully. That is not weakness. It is a quiet rising. Moses did not step into his calling until he spent 40 years in the desert. David did not take the throne after being anointed, but had to flee, living as a hunted man. And Joseph though carrying a great dream, was sold, imprisoned, forgotten. Did God not keep his promise? No. He was building a person mature enough to carry that glory. He doesn't want to place a crown on a child who doesn't yet understand responsibility. He refines by hiding. If you feel you're in a place of being forgotten, that may be the very furnace God has prepared. No one hears. No one knows. No one praises. But heaven is recording every moment of faithfulness in silence. When you pray and no one answers, keep praying. When you help and no one thanks you, keep giving. When you choose right and lose opportunities, stay steadfast, for you do not live for human eyes. You live for God's gaze. One of the hardest lessons is accepting that you won't always see results immediately. But the chosen do not live by what is seen. They live by faith in the unseen, knowing that a flower doesn't bloom at noon. It blooms in the night, then shines when the sun rises. You are in that night, and the flower you've nurtured in tears is waiting for the right moment to burst forth. In those quiet days, you've been forced to turn inward. You had no one to blame, no one to lean on. And that, in truth, is a privilege. For you've learned to stand alone without crumbling. You've rebuilt faith not based on feelings, but on the firmness of a promise. You've begun to believe not because good things happen, but because you know the one who makes good things happen is still at work. The world often judges the process by results, but God sees victory in faithfulness. Do not fear if you have nothing to show. Do not be ashamed if your present is still full of unfinished things. For what is sacred often begins in ruins. Resurrection cannot come without the cross, and glory cannot shine without passing through darkness. There will come a moment when you realize the most precious thing you've gained is not achievement, but the person you've become in the journey. Every silent step has built a soul that endures. Every crack in your heart has opened space for compassion. Every tear shed quietly has created eyes that see life with love instead of judgment. Dear friend, you are being shaped, not to live a safe life, but to live a life of impact. Only someone who has walked through darkness can lead others through it. Only someone who has fallen to the depths can know how to save another who is falling. Only a soul that has been burned can pass the flame to the next generation. God is building something too great to construct overnight. You cannot rush a sacred work. Everything happening, though slow, though dim, is part of a perfect design. And you, by continuing to believe, continuing to be faithful, are proving to both heaven and earth that you are worthy of being entrusted with something great. No one sees the refining when it's still in the fire, but when the gold is brought out, no one can deny its shine. You are that gold. You are being refined not because you're wrong, but because you're precious. There are chapters in the Bible that seem written not in ink, but in silence. Have you noticed that between two great stories, between Joseph's dream and his rise to governor, are years of darkness in prison? Between Bougies leaving Egypt's palace and returning to face Pharaoh are 40 years with no record of what he thought. And between Malachi and Matthew Between the Old and New Testaments are 400 years of God's silence, a void, seemingly meaningless, but a sacred pause for the history of salvation to turn to a new chapter. So it is with you. You may be in that very void, where there is no word, no miracle, nothing to make you feel your faith is on track. But like those Bible pages, silence is not the end. It is a promise being written in invisible ink. And you, dear chosen one, are being given a faith that does not depend on feelings, but is rooted in the knowledge that He works even when I cannot see. Joseph, while imprisoned in Egypt, saw no angels, heard no voice from heaven, but when he was faithful in small things, like interpreting dreams for others in prison, that opened the day of destiny. Not that he was freed right away. It was 2 years later that the other man remembered him. That was time enough to test his heart. Would Joseph keep believing while forgotten? That question is for you too, when no one mentions your name, when no one acknowledges your efforts, when no clear future appears. Will you keep going? Your answer will determine the kind of pearl you are becoming. In Psalm 66, 10-12, the writer says, "For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver. You brought us into the net. You laid burdens on our backs. But you brought us to a place of abundance. The chosen always pass through the fire before entering abundance. But that fire does not burn you. It burns away the excess, the weak, the illusions that are not solid. If you're in a phase where everything old is being stripped away, don't panic. God may be clearing the way for the new. If relationships, once close, grow distant, if positions, once important, no longer matter, if things you once prayed for, you no longer desire, that is not loss. It is preparation. For you cannot step into a season of precious pearls with hands still clutching dust. Do not judge your worth by the present. David was forgotten by his father, despised by his brothers, but seen by God. And when the time came, a simple call from Samuel changed the rest of his life. This is the one anointed. So too will there come a time when someone calls you out from the place where you were forgotten and says, "This is the one entrusted with a mission." But before that word is spoken, there is a season when you must live as if unseen, unchosen. And it is in that time that greatness is sown within you. God's training is not like the world's education. The world teaches skills. God teaches faithfulness. The world crowns the outstanding. God crowns those who dare to stand alone. The world waits for you to shine before supporting you. God stands with you even when you're just a seed in dark soil. Every morning you wake and still pray, still endure, still do what is right, though no one knows. Is another layer of the pearl forming, and when the time comes, the light will not need you to seek it. It will find you to illuminate the pearl within. God says in Isaiah 49:2, "He made my mouth like a sharpened sword. In the shadow of his hand, he hid me. He made me into a polished arrow and concealed me in his quiver." You may be hidden now, not because you're discarded, but because you're being sharpened. An unpolished arrow cannot be shot. An unfinished pearl cannot be displayed. That is why you're in a place no one understands, no one sees, no one calls your name, because you are being hidden for your unveiling. Do not envy those being recognized. Each journey has its own rhythm, and when your turn comes, no one can steal it. For you do not compete for anyone's portion. You are living true to the word set for you before creation. Pearls are unearthed in darkness. Missions are formed in silence, and you, yes, you are living proof of this truth. It is not the one applauded who is strong. It is the one who lives fully each unseen day, keeps their heart pure, and does not abandon faith. That is the one being anointed in secret. Some doors do not open on human schedules. They do not follow logic, nor depend on resumes, connections, or social status. They open at times no one expects, in ways no one anticipates. And for the person who even doubted themselves, those doors bear God's fingerprints, and when He opens them, no hand can shut them. Have you ever waited so long you stopped hoping, ever prayed for an opportunity? Then quietly folded that prayer away because you no longer believed you were worthy. If you're nodding, you're very close to the strangest moment, the moment when the door swings open unannounced. When you stop trying to make it happen, that's when heaven is about to make it come to pass. In Revelation 3:7-8, God says, "These are the words of Him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What He opens, no one can shut, and what He shuts, no one can open. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." That is not mere comfort. It is heaven's certainty. And when the one who holds the key sets the time, no force has the power to delay the day you step into your destiny. The long preparation you've endured was not to leave you stranded in the desert. It was necessary to make you strong. Not just to enter the door, but to stand firm after you've passed through. God does not grant blessings earlier than the time, for He knows what is given too soon can ruin a soul not yet steady. You've been held back, not because you were rejected, but because you're being given the chance to become deep enough, real enough, solid enough to hold the precious thing coming. When the door opens, everything will happen quickly. What was once delayed will suddenly align. People who didn't listen will seek you out. Things that seemed finished will restart, but in a better, bigger, truer form. That is not magic. It is a miracle. And that miracle is not for the talented, but for those who hold fast to faith in the Old Testament. When Isaac dug wells, they were repeatedly taken. The first well, contested. The second, also taken. But he didn't stop. At the third, he named it Rehoboth, meaning the Lord has made room for us. Genesis 26:22. The wonder is, he didn't stop at disappointment. Each time something was taken, he dug again. And finally, he reached a place no one could take. So it is with you. If what you built was stolen, if others claimed what was yours, do not grow bitter. Do not turn from faith, for there is a place waiting for you where you won't need to compete, a door no one else can open, because its lock was designed only for your hand. Dear chosen one, if today seems like nothing has changed, remember, heaven's timing needs no warning. It only needs you to be ready. When the winds shift, the sail need only rise, and you'll be carried further than you dreamed. The opportunity you're praying for may not come from where you expect, but it will come from where God has ordained, and that place always exceeds imagination. God does not operate like humans. When people see too late, He calls it just in time. When people see nothing left, He calls it the raw material of a miracle. So, if you're in a barren phase, don't grieve. A door is forming, quietly, surely, and will open with a single gust. In Acts 12, when Peter was imprisoned, the jail was locked, guards numerous, chains heavy. No one thought he could escape. But in the night, an angel came, broke the chains, opened the doors, and let him out. When he stood free in the streets, he thought he was dreaming. True miracles often begin in the night, and they come so quietly that even the recipient doubts they are real. If you faced closed doors time and again, don't let that erode your faith. Perhaps you haven't reached your door, and maybe, just when you stop searching, it will open on its own. For what you need is not more effort, but walking in the right moment. God is arranging everything. The people you need will come. The places you belong will call your name. The dreams you once hid will be rekindled, not in fear, but in glory. No promise of He falls to the ground in vain, and if He planted a dream in your heart, He will fulfill it. So, whether you're in silence or chaos, let your heart be at peace, not because everything is easy, but because you know, when the time comes, a door will open without you knocking, and when you step through, no one can shut it. Sometimes people close doors on you because they think you're not enough, not prominent enough, not loud enough, not successful enough. But God does not choose based on resumes, degrees, or fame. He looks at the heart. He measures faith when no one sees. And in His time, not early, not late, He will open the door that all the ones you knocked on before remained silent. The truth is, heaven's doors don't need to be opened by hand. They open through surrender. When a heart is cleansed of pride, comparison, envy, that's when the spiritual lock begins to turn. And when that door swings wide, you don't have to push through. You are invited to step in. No need to strive, for grace is not earned by effort. No need to play another's role, for God only uses those true to themselves. The door He opens is not to satisfy ego, but to fulfill a plan greater than you ever imagined. When Esther was chosen as queen, she didn't know it was a step to save her nation. Entering the palace, she only knew she was an orphan with no notable lineage. Yet among hundreds of maidens, she was chosen, not for beauty, but for her humility, wisdom, and readiness. And in the day of crisis, she rose and saved her people, because she knew the time had come. Every chosen one has their own Esther day, a day that seems ordinary but is destined, a door that looks incidental but is a gateway to heaven. And only those who don't give up, who keep the flame alive despite contrary winds, can step through when the moment arrives. If you're now between no longer the old and not yet the future, you're in the exact place where turning points begin. This is the space of final preparation. where you stop trying to control everything, where you cease chasing recognition, where you become light enough to be lifted. And right then, the unexpected moment will find you. No need to run anymore. When what's meant for you draws near, it will walk toward you. In Isaiah 60:22, God promises, "I am the Lord. In its time, I will do this swiftly," meaning you don't need to make the miracle happen. Your task is to stay ready when the time comes. What was slow will become fast. What was hard will become simple. What was delayed will be released. Your door is coming. Perhaps not as you pictured. Perhaps not from where you're looking. But that doesn't make it less miraculous. And when it opens, you'll understand why every delay before was necessary. For if those other doors had opened, you wouldn't have waited for the true one. Do not fear the pause. In English, there's a phrase often used, divine delay, sacred postponement. It means not hindered, but protected from what isn't right. You're not late, you're being aligned. And once you step through the right door, you'll see the losses that pained you were paving the way. God does not tease you with false hope. If He planted a dream in your heart, it's because He has a path ready. And if that dream keeps returning, if your heart has never let go of that longing, then perhaps that dream is part of the open door season approaching. Not every dream is from God, but those that remain after pain, after trials, after doubt, are often the ones He won't let you forget. Now, even in the darkest part of your journey, know this light is coming from an unexpected place. A call, an email, a meeting that seems accidental, an opportunity appearing through a door once closed. When the time comes, no force is needed. The door will open, and when it does, you will no longer be the old you, for you've walked through waiting, been refined by tears, learned lessons when you had nothing in hand. You'll step through that door, not with pride, but with deep gratitude, not to prove anything, but to live fully what you were born to fulfill. There are tears that don't fall from your eyes, but from your soul. They don't slide silently down your cheeks, but drip in the depths of things unsaid. Those tears no one sees, no one wipes, but God keeps His treasure. For He Himself said in Psalm 56:8, "You have kept count of my wanderings, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Every time you cry quietly over something broken, it's not weakness. It's proof you're living truly, loving truly, believing truly. And it's when God draws nearer than ever. He doesn't use your tears to pity you. He uses them as raw material to mold something solid within you. Like a potter shaping a precious vessel from clay and water. And the water here is the tears of faithfulness amid adversity. Perhaps you've asked, why do I cry so much? It's not because you're weak, but because you're pregnant with something sacred. Mothers before birth always endure pain. They groan, bear it, contract. But afterward, when the child cries into life, all pain vanishes. The pain has been transformed into new life. So it is with you. What you endure is not just emotion. It's a form of spiritual labor. You're carrying a piece of God's plan, and your tears are the sign that life is about to be born. Not death, but a beginning. Every time you cry for being misunderstood, you're being purified of the need for recognition. Every time you cry because loved ones turned away, you're learning to root yourself in what cannot be shaken. Every time you cry because a door slammed shut, another door is quietly being built behind the curtain of faith. Tears soften the heart, but strengthen the soul. For no one steps into a mission without being broken. Every prophet has cried. Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet. Jesus himself wept at Lazarus's tomb, not for lack of hope, but because his heart deeply felt human pain. He doesn't love you less when you cry. On the contrary, that's when he draws near, embracing you with understanding beyond any worldly comfort. He doesn't say, "Don't cry," to stifle your emotions. He speaks to lift you, to remind you those tears do not fall in vain. A pearl does not form from ease. It's created when a foreign object, a grain of sand, enters an oyster to protect itself. The oyster secretes nacre around the intruder, day after day. Each layer is an act of endurance, and gradually, what was once pain becomes a pearl. What once hurt becomes precious. You are that oyster. And what pierced your heart, words that wounded, rejection, loss, can all become a radiant pearl if you don't let it harden you, but let it mature you. You're being polished, not to be tougher, but to shine brighter. In Isaiah 61:3, God promises to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair, meaning your tears will be exchanged, not lost, not forgotten, but transformed, from ashes to glory. You thought you were losing, but you were amassing treasure in heaven, not with gold or silver, but with every time you forgave when you had the right to resent, with every time you kept walking when you had reason to stop, with every tear no one wiped. But heaven recorded, dear friend, do not hide your tears. They don't weaken you. They make you real. And only the real can touch what is true. One day, the very tears you shed today will become your most powerful testimony. You won't just speak of miracles. You'll speak of a journey that was real, pained real, believed real, and restored real. And then, others will see the light in your eyes and ask, "Where did you find it?" You'll point to the very wounds that once brought you down and smile, "I found it in my tears." 2025 is entering its second half. And if anyone thought every miracle had to happen at the year's start, they surely don't understand how heaven works. Some seasons begin not with light, but with quiet perseverance through dry days. Some seasons don't announce themselves with thunder, but with long silences, where the chosen must learn to stand firm, even when their heart feels nothing. Dear friend, if lately your heart no longer stirs when you pray, if spiritual songs no longer bring tears, if scriptures that once nourished now pass by without feeling, Don't think you've drifted from God. Don't think your faith is dead. You may be walking through the deepest, most mature phase of your journey. The phase of steadfastness, not based on emotion, but on choice. God doesn't demand you burn with fire every day. Some days, He only asks that you keep walking, though slow, though weary, though you feel nothing inside. For in those emotionless steps, you're writing a rare kind of faithfulness. Faithfulness when there's no reason to feel it. 5. Has not been an easy year for many. Dreams have been delayed. Plans have shattered. Prayers remain unformed. But if you're still holding faith, still passing through each day without sinking into bitterness, then you've won more than a battle. You're becoming someone with true faith, not a faith that shifts with the weather. Some rains don't come at the season's start, but pour down when no one expects. Some harvests that seem barren bloom at the last moment. And if 2025 has taken too many of your tears, it's very possible this same year will return pearls you never anticipated. Remember, Moses didn't see the promised land in his first year leading the people. Joseph didn't see Egypt's throne right after his dream. Jesus didn't step into public ministry right after John's baptism, but before that was a long journey of waiting, training, and silence. The called do not measure results by current feelings. They live knowing they are being prepared, even when they feel nothing. 2025 is a test for mature souls. Not everyone has the patience to live through days with nothing special happening. Not everyone is steady enough to avoid being toppled by wordless disappointment, but you. If you're still standing, you're no longer the old you. You're becoming a spiritual warrior, quiet but enduring, tired but not quitting, pained but not lost. Your harvest may not be as dazzling as another's, but the fruit you bring will be richer, deeper, lasting longer, because it was born from unconditional faithfulness, from a faith no longer tied to feelings, but rooted in the Word. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." It doesn't say they always soar. Some days, they only walk. And some days, it's simply not stopping. But whether soaring, running, or trudging, God counts it as faith, and He rewards those who don't stop midway. You're living in a tough year, but you're living with a steadfastness only those who've been through fire can hold. 2025 may be the year your heart felt dry, but it's also the year you discovered the only stream you need doesn't come from outside. It comes from the sacred source within, where God dwells. No noise needed, no special atmosphere, just a heart that doesn't close. If your 2025 began in darkness, know that it's not failure. It's the foundation God is preparing to paint something brilliant. No precious pearl shines without first lying in the deep, dark earth. No anointed one rises without living through long, lonely nights. No light, no applause, only their breath and a trembling faith in silence. God isn't hiding from you in the dark. He's concealing Himself to teach you to see with spiritual eyes. If you're still groping without clear direction, it may not be because you're lost, but because you're being trained for steadfastness. Darkness doesn't just test faith, it reveals who you are when no one watches. When David was driven from the king's court, he didn't lose God's anointing. Instead, he sang his most pained, truest, deepest songs, and in the darkness of Adullam's cave, he wrote psalms. Those words, born in tears, became light for generations after. Not the palace, but the darkness made him God's man. So it is with you. If your 2025 tears fall in rooms no one notices, don't think you're weak. You're adding layers of light to the pearl within. Every time you don't give up is a layer of spiritual nacre coating your wounds, and layer by layer, it forms a new you, not just radiant, but unbreakable. When Joseph was in prison, forgotten despite helping others, he might have thought his life ended in darkness. But there, he learned to interpret others' dreams before his own came true. Perhaps the darkness you're in isn't the end, but a transition to greater clarity than you ever hoped, where you stop seeking miracles and become the one who makes miracles for others. 2025, with all its uncertainties, its closed doors, its unformed hopes, may be the season you learn to embrace darkness as part of the process. Darkness isn't the absence of light, it's the absence of old light. Perhaps the light you followed no longer works, and God is leading you to light from within. Isaiah 45:3 says, I will give you hidden treasures, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord. That verse doesn't say treasures lie in daylight. They're in the dark, meaning you must walk into the night, trust in the night, dig in the night, to touch what is precious. If the tears you've shed this year weren't dried by human hands, God Himself will turn them into proof of depth, and you will shine, not because you were never hurt, but because you dared to hurt fully, then kept walking. There will come a moment when you no longer fear darkness, for you'll realize it's where you're shielded from noise, where you learn to listen, where you find your true voice, and where the pearl begins to form. Unseen, unknown, crafted only by you and God. No one shines without first quietly breaking. Those who truly blaze don't come from stages, but from long nights no one remembers, no one claps for, no one records. And you, if you're walking through the night, don't turn back. Keep going. That's how you walk through rain to see dawn. That's how you turn tears into pearls. And that's how 2025 will become a chapter never forgotten in your life. The chapter where, from darkness, you birthed light. There's a truth few can accept. God often disguises blessings as losses. What we think is the end is the beginning. What seems taken is being preserved. And seasons that seem dry end up sowing the most radiant harvest. For heaven often pours heavy rain before dawn breaks. If 2025 began with things that broke your heart, you're not alone. Many started this year with goodbyes, with rejections, with unformed dreams. But dear one, perhaps you don't need a perfect start, but a miraculous finish. And the best part of this year is still ahead. True joy doesn't come right after laughter. It comes after tears. After nights you collapsed with no strength left. After prayers you thought were forgotten. After you let go of what you could no longer hold. Those things you thought were lost are what make you light enough to soar. Dear friend, God has never let a tear fall to the ground without bearing fruit. He is the one who makes what seems random become ordered, the one who takes what's broken to lay the foundation for what's solid, the one who can turn the most tattered parts of life into a meaningful tapestry. But that only happens after the rain. After rain comes soft soil, sprouting seeds, fresh air, and the moment God pours grace. Not before the rain, not during the downpour, but after. The question is, who will still be there after the rain? The chosen are not those who avoid storms. They are the ones who endure being soaked, keep their fire, and don't let faith wash away in the flood. And those who walk through rain without losing faith, will see the rainbow. Joseph thought he lost everything: family, honor, future. But all that seemed lost was paving the way. For one day, he stood in a position to save an entire nation. He wasn't lost. He was being led by a detour. So when he arrived, he was not only gifted, but deep-hearted. Are you on a detour? Perhaps. But look closely. Are you changing? Are you more patient, loving, truer, praying deeper? If so, you're not lost. You're going deep. And that's the only path to the pearl. Perhaps you've looked at your hands and said, "I've lost it." But God looks at the future and says, "No, you haven't lost. I'm preserving it to give back at a more beautiful time." In Joel 2:25, the promise is clear. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. That's not just material restoration. It's the recovery of time, dreams, dignity, emotions. God has a way of returning what you thought was gone forever. By making this year bear fruit enough to cover the years before. If you've shed tears in 2025, you may be in that cycle. The cycle where heaven doesn't stop the rain right away, but begins working in the soil, where you cannot see, where your soul is sowing seeds, and in the end, where you'll receive, not just with joy, but with a deep, complete joy, distilled from tears. Joy after rain is not like the joy of those who've never known sorrow. It's quieter, but surer, not shallow, not fragile, but solid as a pearl, forged through pressure. If you thought you were losing this year, wait for the next chapter. God doesn't end stories with ellipses, and He never abandons the work His hands began. Have you ever wondered why the closer you get to God's promise, the more chaotic life becomes? Why? When you've truly surrendered, you face more struggles than before. The answer isn't in mistakes, but in your calling. When you're chosen, you'll face headwinds, not because you're on the wrong path, but because you're on the right one. Every ship with a mission faces contrary winds, but those very winds, if you set your sails right, will push you to your destination faster than any human strength could. You don't need to avoid the wind. You need to learn to use it. And first, you must understand not every attack is meant to destroy you. Some tremors are only to strip away what no longer fits. Some people turn away not because you did wrong, but because they don't belong to your next season. When Joseph shared his dream of rising, the first to oppose him were his own brothers. When David was anointed, the first to belittle him was his own brother. When Esther stepped into a role to change her nation's fate, she didn't receive applause, but danger so great she risked her life. The chosen do not escape opposition, for light always disturbs places accustomed to darkness. And you, if you're misunderstood, misjudged, betrayed, may be walking so close to something great that darkness trembles. Don't retreat just because you're resisted. That pressure confirms you're carrying something valuable. 2025 may be the year you discover not everyone who started with you will finish with you. Some are only meant for a segment, then must leave to make room for grace. Their departure isn't failure. It's shaping you into someone stronger, someone who relies on God more than people. Some winds don't come to knock you down, but to test the depth of your roots. And your roots, if anchored in the promise, not results, will hold you steady in a storm no one understands why you haven't broken. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." You're living in 2025 where those words come alive. If you're pressed, you're not yet crushed. If you're isolated, you're not abandoned. And if you're still waking to continue, you're still winning. The chosen are rarely chosen by people, but called by God in silence, then refined through adversity. And when the time comes, He uses the very things that hurt you to arm you. From pain to understanding, from betrayal to mercy, from loneliness to mission. Winds come unannounced, but the called don't fear changing winds. They learn to hold their compass steady. And that compass isn't just feelings or others' advice, but certainty in God's word. Even when chaos surrounds. Have you seen an eagle? It doesn't fly to avoid storms. It uses the wind's force to lift itself higher. And you have those spiritual wings. Don't just live to endure, rise to soar. For the chosen aren't meant to hide from wind, but to conquer it. Not everyone can understand a soul touched by God. When someone starts living by divine guidance, the language they speak, the paths they choose, the way they wait, and the sacrifices they quietly bear, often leave others puzzled. For things of heaven always run counter to earthly logic. You may be living among people who love you dearly, but still don't grasp what you carry in your heart. Not because they're callous, but because the burden you bear wasn't given to them. Not everyone receives revelation at once. And if spiritual loneliness makes you think you're lost, you may be righter than ever. The chosen don't need the crowd's approval. They need complete obedience in what few see. It's the faithfulness in unnamed tasks, the quiet endurance amid prolonged misunderstandings. That forms the foundation God is building for a role no one else can fill. Not through public victories, but through uncounted steadfastness. God doesn't misplace anyone. He doesn't call you to a mountain only to abandon you on a cliff. If He's shown you something in your heart, your place is already prepared, not a stage to boast, but a destined role. You may now be behind the curtain, but every time you choose obedience over rebellion, you're brought closer to that place. No need to prove your worth. No need to fill the void with complaints. Everything you do in silence is being written on heaven's tablet. Every night you stay awake just to tell God, I don't understand, but I still trust, is crafting an invisible history that will lead to a clear unveiling in due time. Joseph was imprisoned not for crime, but for faithfulness. 13 years misunderstood, forgotten, sidelined. But on the day Pharaoh needed a dream interpreter, only one name was mentioned. No one else could replace Joseph. Not because he was more prominent, but because he was more ready. A man with wounds, but no bitterness. A man trained in darkness long enough that when light came, he wasn't blinded. You're being trained similarly, not to be famous, but to be useful, not to be praised, but to stand firm in a place others couldn't bear, the place you're headed. Not just an open door, is the perfect fit between you and a destined gap no one else can fill. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do," meaning each carries a unique design, and that design doesn't repeat. There are works prepared only for you, though others go before you, though some resemble you. There's still something only you are entrusted with. The chosen sometimes walk a path with no companion, not because they're wrong, but because their path is too specific. Perhaps you've wondered, why does everyone get support while I'm so quiet? But it's exactly because you're called to a place no one else can endure, that you need preparation no one else must bear. God doesn't favor some over others, but He digs deeper in those He plans to raise higher in responsibility. People will see success, but angels see the depth of your trust. And that's what makes you irreplaceable. For some things cannot be taught, only forged through tearful nights. If someone said you're not enough, remember, they don't see the depths you've crossed. They don't count the times you stayed silent without quitting. They don't measure the weight of choices you bore alone. And that's why God didn't consult them before choosing you. Dear friend, if 2025 has set you back, pushed you off stage, misunderstood, compared, perhaps that's how God is clearing space to place you where you belong. A place not based on achievements, but on faithfulness. You don't need everyone on your side when you know you're standing in God's plan. You don't need applause when you know you're being shaped for something lasting. And when the time comes, that place, though not glamorous, will fit you so perfectly you'll say, so every loss I went through was just paving the way for this. Not everyone enters 2025 with cheers. Many do so quietly, with unclear faith, carrying only fragile hopes and a soul torn in many places. But strangely, it's they, those who seem weak, who still walk. Though on their knees, if you're still walking, you're among the rare, the ones who don't quit. 2025 wasn't born to test you, but to certify you. What you've overcome in the first 6 months wasn't in vain. They're credentials, a spiritual record of every time you chose to keep going when the only reason was I trust God knows what He's doing. The chosen aren't those who never fall. They're the ones who rise again and again, though no one claps. They don't wait for recognition. They don't need company. They don't require favorable conditions. They live by an inner certainty that if He called me, He will keep me. And that keeping isn't always smooth, but always enough. You may not carry a trophy case, but you carry what heaven and earth heed faithfulness. Something unfeigned, something unborrowed, something only formed through silent choices to keep going when your mind wanted to stop long ago. 5. Won't reward the fastest runners, but those who don't stop. It won't crown those with perfect plans, but those who keep going though plans keep crumbling. For grace doesn't demand you be great, only that you keep the fire. Those who don't quit carry a strength that darkness fears, for they're not easily subdued, not because they're tough, but because the one within is unshakable. They don't need to shout, but their steps echo in the unseen world. Every time they rise, old wounds become metals, old tears become fuel, and every rejection becomes a sign heaven is clearing the path. Paul wrote, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." Not, I was never tired, not I always felt strong, but I kept the faith, kept the spirit, kept the promise, and in the end, kept the reward. Dear friend, if 2025 feels like it's pushing you to the edge, perhaps it's because you're on the verge of breakthrough. The enemy doesn't attack the harmless, and if you're under assault, you may be closer to victory than ever. Those who don't quit aren't those who don't feel pain. They're the ones who feel it but don't retreat, who fear but still step, who know they're not enough, but know the one with them is enough. God doesn't seek the perfect. He seeks those who don't turn back. And if you've walked through half a year with silent battles, the rest cannot make you falter, for you have proof. You've survived, and you're being shaped for a glorious end. No one sees a tree's roots growing deep in the soil, but when the season comes, people marvel why that tree didn't break in the storm. And you, your soul, is rooting like that, in silence, in pain, in faithfulness. And there will come a time when others ask, "How are you still standing?" And you'll answer with a smile, because you know God chose you, and you didn't quit. Dear chosen ones, if this whole journey has ever made you think you've gone too far, grown too weary to believe one more time, know this now. You're closer than ever to what you once only dared pray for in tears. Not close in geography, but in spirit. So close that if you don't turn back, you'll see the meaning of every night you've passed through. Time is no longer your enemy. It's working for you. Everything that hurt you, that bent you in silence, is becoming the foundation for a new season where you don't just endure, but live as one anointed, no longer in silence, but in open steadfastness, not loud, but clear. People will be amazed, but heaven knew all along. For the rising of the chosen isn't in forecasts. It's in the word sown quietly from the year's early months. When you thought you'd collapse, But you didn't. You overcame. And now, your restoration isn't just personal, it's a declaration. This rising isn't to start over, but to step into what's been prepared. No longer a wounded one trying to survive, but one bearing living scars, ready to lead, to lift, to give, to establish, and to live true to the role of one sent. This is no longer a year of inner wrestling. This is the year you claim your portion, with hands that once trembled, but now know how to hold fast to what no one else believed was real. And when you rise, not for fame, not to settle scores, not to win, but simply because God still calls your name in your heart, every chain will fall, every remnant will burn away, every old season will no longer bind your steps. For those chosen by God are never forgotten, only held back, until they're strong enough to step into the right hour. Dear chosen ones, if you're still standing here, still listening, still carrying a flame in your heart, then you hold something more precious than gold, stronger than steel, brighter than the sun after rain, a faith that walked through the dark night and still lives. 5. Doesn't end in June. It hasn't stopped at the halfway mark. The greatest glory God promised hasn't yet appeared. There are still 6 months to witness what heaven has long prepared. There are still doors no one dared knock. There are still miracles yet to speak. There are still dreams thought dead, being revived beneath the soil of silence. It doesn't matter how many times you failed in the first half. It doesn't matter how many tears you shed in rooms no one knows. What matters isn't where you fell, but whether you'll rise. And if today you choose to keep going, you're rewriting your own ending. God doesn't need you to shine right away. He needs you to keep the fire, just one ember glowing in your heart, and He can fan it into a blaze. Just one I still believe, however faint, and He can write a new chapter for your life. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait for every pain to vanish. Don't wait for someone to validate you. Move forward, with hands still trembling, with a heart still cracked, with eyes once drenched. For those very things are proof you're real enough for God to use. The tears you've shed are not meaningless. They're flowing into the promised land, and that land will bloom in season. No one knows the exact day or hour, but one thing is certain: 2025 will not close as it began. You will not leave this year as a failure. You will step out as one bearing pearls formed by tears, by trials, by enduring faith. This isn't just a year in history. It's the year heaven marks you, not with thunderbolts, but with inner rebirth. Not with cheers, but with quiet perseverance. Not with easy miracles, but with real, deep, eternal change. If someone doubted you, if you doubted yourself, look back at the journey. You're still here, still moving. And that movement, however slow, is a victory blooming step by step. Keep going. Not because it's easy, but because you were chosen to not stop. You were born not to vanish in the storm, but to stand firm and become living proof for those sinking in despair. 25. Still has room to mark the miraculous, and the one to bring it is none other, you.